Okay, should we start? Hello, welcome to the Monday, October 22nd, 2012 Single Family Design Board. We have any staff comments?
Madam Chair, Michelle Bedard is out this week, so I'll be staffing the meeting today.
Okay, wonderful.
And I'm not aware of any changes to the agenda.
Okay. And would you like to call the roll?
Chair Bowman,
Here.
Vice Chair Sweeney,
Here.
Bernie Bernstein, here, Brian Miller,
Here.
Lisa James, here, Jamie Pierce, Jim Zimmer.
Here.
Thank you.
Jamie will be in there.
Okay. Wonderful. At this time, I'd like to open up public comment. Any member of the public may address the Single Family Design Board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the board today. I see no one coming forward, so I will close public comment. And I'd like to make a motion for approval of the minutes of the Single Family Design Board for October 8th, 2000. Thank you. I have a second for that. Great. And go through those. All right, for any comments. 1533 Shoreline Drive. Any corrections, additions? 1702 La Vista del Oceano Drive. (1835) El Camino de la Luz. 920 Camino Viejo Road. 1482 Lou Dillon. 20 Camino Verde. And 2224 Gibraltar Road. Okay, no comments. Okay, then we have approval.
I call for the question.
Okay, and all in favor? Aye. That's okay. Minutes have been sustained. Now we have the consent calendar. Oh, consent calendar for October 15th, 2012.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
on that date, on October 15th, item A, 218 San Clemente, was approval of a review after final as submitted. Item B, 2926 Serena Road, was received project design and final approvals with NPO. Item C, 511 Drexel Drive, received project design and final approvals with NPO findings. Item D, 1535 Paterno Road, was continued 1 week to the consent calendar with comments. All the items were reviewed by Jim Zimmerman and Jamie Pierce.
Okay. And we have a first.
Sober. I'll first it.
Okay, and a second? And a second by Jim. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And next, the consent calendar for October 22nd, 2012.
Yes, on October 22nd, on consent, item A, 1535 Paterno Road, received project design approval and final approvals with the NPO findings and Hillside District findings. Item B, 1950 Eucalyptus Hill Road, received project design approval and final approvals along with the NPO and Hillside NPO findings. Item C, 464 Brosian Way, received project design approval with NPO findings.
Okay.
All of items were reviewed by Jim Zimmerman.
Okay, and can we have a first and a second then?
So moved.
And a second by Jim Zimmerman. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right. Any announcements? Staff? No announcements? No subcommittees? Okay, then we can get started with our first item, 220 Salida del Sol. Let's see, now this is project design review. Project design approval is requested. This is
You can open that.
This is a proposal to construct a new 300-square-foot one-story addition and 556-square-foot two-story addition to an existing 1,599-square-foot single-family residence and an attached 441-square-foot two-car garage. The proposed total of 2,896 square feet located on an 8,524-square-foot parcel in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone is 87% of the maximum floor-to-lot area ratio. Project design approval is requested. Compliance with Tier 2 stormwater management program is required prior to granting final approval. This project was last reviewed on September 24th. Oh, and then we have some minutes.
Okay. September 24th, it's the last review. Following comments were made. The board finds that the proposed project at 87% The board finds the proposed project at 87% FAR to be acceptable and appreciates the applicant's design for a neighborhood sensitivity and compliance with the single-family design guidelines. The board would like to have the applicant provide a site landscape plan that includes landscaping to ensure neighbor privacy. Provide photos for the proposed deck toward the adjacent properties to help mitigate privacy issues. Provide compliance with Tier 2 stormwater management program prior to the granting of a final approval. Provide a color and materials board for design review file and corresponding color schedule on the elevation sheets. Provide a final architectural details, railings, fireplaces, etc. The motion passed unanimously with Mr. Sweeney absent.
Okay, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Tom Oxton. I'm the project architect. And
Let me just say
we don't have the drawings complete for a design review approval, but what I'd like to do is use this opportunity as sort of a in progress to go over the landscape plan and just reassure what we've got is generally in the right direction. And then I've got the exterior elevations on CAD so we can look at the transition from the hand drawings to the CAD. What I'd like, there was concern, let me go to the overall, well, this will probably work out well. There was concern with the neighbor to the east, right here, with the second-story addition happening here. And then Jim had asked to study the views looking south into that neighbor. So if we go to a larger site plan here, what we did was we studied the views looking over to the neighbor to the west. This neighbor sent a letter, and they were concerned about their privacy with regards to the two-story addition. And then the neighbor to the south is what we studied as well. So I'm going to lay out some photos looking west at this neighbor. And what we're proposing is an 8-foot screening selectively along that western property line. So these are the shots, and this is standing at the right height. This is at 9 foot above the existing finished floor. And as you can see, the tree in this corner does a pretty good job. We'll go over the windows up here, but it really creates enough of a screening here that somewhat mitigates the need to extend a proposed hedge, and I'll go over what we're proposing here. But the idea is just sort of the height and the scope of it, I think, at first. But so this is 8 feet, which is what we'd be proposing. And as you can see, the house to the west is really below, and it's hard to really get a glimpse below that eave line. So 8 feet, what I've drawn in ink there is this stretch, about a 36-foot stretch of screening, which would be a trumpet vine and I've got a detail for, here we go, to extend the existing fence, which is between 5'6" and 6 feet, up with some posts and some wires to get that trumpet vine to grow and to cover that area to an 8-foot height. And so that idea would then extend from here. And if you look at the, what they're trying to accomplish is to retain the view from grade level across the corner looking to the southwest. They're hoping that if there's no privacy issues in that direction, to retain this kind of a feel from the rear yard. And then looking to the south, this would be looking to the south. So we would be proposing a similar type of, and that's 8 feet there. So that when they're at grade, they really can't see the ocean anymore, but they can retain this view here. So I suppose if 8 feet was deemed to be a little low there, that could be increased. And the idea then would be, so this stretch here would be 16 feet at 8 foot high, and this would be 36 feet long at 8 foot high. That would be the direction we're heading with the screening. And then I've got the exterior elevations we can look at. I think there's no surprises, I think, with respect to how it's coming along. This is the north and west elevation. I think everything laid out just the way we thought it would from the hand drawings. And then the east and the south. And this is, we're looking at eliminating this window, I think, on the final. This is the one looking south. And then looking, these would be the windows that would be looking to the west. And we've got a bathroom window. And this window may even go too when we come back for final, but we certainly wouldn't add more. But I think this may go and this may go. So there's not a lot of big windows. They're small on that second floor. But anyway, that's kind of where we are for sort of an in-progress review.
Okay. And I'd like to open up for public comment now.
It's me again. How are you guys doing?
Hi, I was just going to call you up here.
Representing the,
Oh, you're just so quick.
my folks.
Hi,
Yes.
Michael
Nice
Cohen.
to see you again. Actually, I was looking for your email address. Maybe you can give it to me later. That'd be great.
Introduce yourself, please.
Is this thing on?
Yes. Well,
Michael Cohen.
no, it's not on. Now it is.
How's that?
That's
Much better. Yeah, I'm Michael Cohen. We spoke last time on the same topic, 219, their Salida del Sol project. My folks are the Views Shed people at 219 Cordova Drive. And I just would say, I just peeked in on that, and I wanted to ask what the legal height maximum is.
it's 8 feet, I believe. For fencing. 8 feet. So he's going as high as he can.
And that was my concern, is that we'll make sure that view shed is there. I don't know what you're going to do about the corner. I hadn't thought about that. I'm more interested in taking care of my folks' privacy from the second level, as we discussed earlier. And that's what I'm asking the board to do, is to assure that view shed. And if the legal maximum is 8 feet, then that's what I would request.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know about the corner. I hadn't thought it would affect my parents' privacy, but I guess that's in your hands.
Okay. Thank you.
That's
sir.
my comment.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Ask for clarification.
Yes.
Which one is yours or new?
Oh, you got all the hard questions for me, don't you?
You're just off the edge there.
This right here,
look at one.
219 Cordova Drive,
There-
is not on
once
this
you get the other
photo. It's
ones
one
up.
of
Yeah, it's just the corner of you.
show 'em this
That
one.
other one is.
So there's the
We have to
line
turn it
there.
this way, unfortunately, because,
There you
We-
go.
we
That's a
have-
better one, and this one.
This is the one that clearly
yeah.
has the amount there, the area in question.
Okay,
So-
let me turn that around and show the public. So this is your parents' house?
This is their house.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you had done some angles on it. You thought it would still cover the windows. Is that right?
Yeah, we, it looks like, there's the eave line, so below that line there. So there's a space between the top of the fence and the eave, which would actually, you could look down if there wasn't vegetation there and see the tops of the windows. So this fencing can, comes up at 8 feet, clearly covers that.
Yeah, and then about the tree that was in there, remember, is that still staying in there?
This tree is still
This
there.
tree here, yeah. I mean, this is obviously higher there, and we love that. I would, encourage something that would grow higher, to be honest. But I can only do what the law says. They really like this thing because it's definitely clearly blocking the view shed and creating the most privacy. But of course, the homeowners have interest in their own for view, and I understand that. So, thank you so much.
Certainly, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, and we'll move on to questions from the board. Yes, Lisa.
Can you tell me, or could someone clarify what is meant by in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone that this project falls under in the description here in the top of
Do you
it?
want to explain that, Jim?
Yeah, the appealable,
Non-
1,000 feet from high tide. Appealable zone be 1,000 feet from high tide inward. So it takes up, let's say on the mesa, it would take up part of Shoreline Drive. It just depends on the configuration of the land at the beach. And so you have to go through a planning commission approval, or if you're on the bluff, then geological archaeology studies done. So non-appealable is, I think, up to Cliff Drive. And it's a matter of filling out the forms and submitting for a coastal approval through the city.
So,
You probably haven't, have you?
No, we haven't done it yet, but yes, well, if we would,
does that mean that the neighbors can't appeal, or are we just talking about the coastal commission?
Well, I suppose that the neighbors could appeal. I can't answer that, but I assume they could.
We have a 10-day period for appeal.
Sure.
So is this something different, but just using
No.
the same term? This is the same thing.
Yes.
So we need to get some clarification on what that means anyway.
Where did Jaime go? Well,
Yeah,
But you could still appeal through the design review board.
yeah.
yeah, okay.
thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions? No more questions? Comments? Okay.
So
Bernie?
now that we're at, I think I'm turned on, yeah. Hello. Now that we are at the 87%, do we still, we don't have any 25 closest homes or anything like that, or do we?
Well,
Because
we
typically we should see
We
what
saw
the
that
neighborhood.
at the last meeting. We pulled out this exhibit here, which is sort of a graphic excerpt of the charts that were done. But because it's over 85 and it's less than, I think, 90, is that right? Oh, yes. This is what I'll pull this out again. So this, the orange parcel here is our subject parcel. These bright yellow ones are over 85. This is 90, 90, and 110. And then these don't count, but I just looked right off of the 20, the way that the city, there was an 89 and a 95. And, most of these appear to be in the 60s and so forth. And it seemed like this one at 87 was in line with what the board thought would be okay.
And here's
Madam
some
Chair,
ranking.
if I may, just rereading from the 6 items that were part of the motion at the last visit by this applicant. said the board finds that the proposed project at 87% FAR to be acceptable and appreciates the applicant's design for neighborhood sensitivity and compliance with single-family design guidelines. So it appears that question was answered at the last meeting.
Yes.
I think being that you're exceeding 85%, do you have to hand deliver to the 20 closest homes? Do you understand
Oh, yeah,
that?
yeah, we had to mail and hand deliver in case
Yeah.
we've got some tenants there, yes.
Right,
That was
okay.
done, yes.
So he's done his due diligence. Yes.
So while we're on this subject, I just would like to emphasize that we're still in the design review process, and comments that we had last week that may have happened quickly, or, if we forgot to look at something, I still think it's appropriate that we should look. I'm not saying this is horrific or anything, but I just think we have new members on our team here, and I don't even know if they've looked at this, but it is the largest, the very largest. It's number one, if I'm reading this correctly, in terms of, even though there are 3 other 2-story additions nearby that might have been done before this board existed. So we really need to, pay attention. They're asking for a lot of building, and it is aggressive with tall wall behind it. And so I just want everybody to look carefully at the details.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Any other questions? And if not, then we'll move to comments. Oh, come on.
Was he going to show us any of these other items from last time, or?
Well, I'm not prepared to have all of the drawings that you need for your design review. What I was hoping to do was the screening actually became a big deal with the owners. So we spent a lot of time trying to determine to what effect we could still satisfy your concerns and the neighbors' concerns. So I didn't have my drawings done, but I saw this would be a good opportunity to do an in-progress review and get some direction from the board with respect to that screening, because that did represent much of the discussion at the first meeting.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Fred.
I'm going to abstain from this item, but it sounds like one of the questions we might want to hear comments from our landscape members as to whether or not this type of screening versus landscaping is acceptable. I sense that's what the applicant's asking for.
You mean as far as a vine, there is a vine growing on
No,
this.
I understand that, but I think the question he may be asking is a fence vine screen more acceptable than trees or other landscape solution in front of that fence?
I see.
That may be the question that someone wants to comment on.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Yes, Jamie.
Thank you. So this, I'm sorry, this is facing west?
It's facing the west.
Okay. And so the view corridor for them is really the mountains at a distance, is that right? Or is it
A
the,
bit of the ocean, that's kind of down towards...
You're still seeing the
Maybe down the coast there.
so there's the ocean in between those
That's
trees?
more, yeah, that and as you turn south.
Ready to put that up on the camera, please? And that's one of the things we want to do
Yeah, I
is
think the...
make sure the public can see what we're talking about.
This is really the corner that is of, they're trying to retain that view from ground level when they're standing at grade in their rear yard, rather than continuing the screening around the entire south and the west. We're proposing to selectively screen based upon the sensitivities that the board and we've looked at, as well as not wanting to propose a thick screening like a myoporum or some heavy shrub, and keep it thin and manageable like a trumpet vine on a trellis might allow.
I have a question for you. Or,
Yeah.
have you had any, this neighbor complained at all, or?
No,
Been
we
concerned?
haven't heard that. Jim identified that as a concern at the last meeting and suggested we come back with the photos. And in fact, I mean, it needs something.
Well, I will weigh in on it. I think that this is a good solution in that it is a lot more manageable. It's a bit more permanent of a solution than a shrub that could die. So the fence is there, the vine could die, but then, that's an easily replaced item as opposed to a tree or a shrub. So I find it acceptable as a solution. Anyone else?
Well, is there additional landscaping, or is it just?
That's the only landscaping we're proposing. The site was recently, they remodeled the house a while ago and included some landscaping, which really represents that this terrace was done out here, and this is all nicely landscaped. So they weren't really proposing anything except for dealing with the screening issue.
I'd refer to our landscape people, but I would think that you could start with something really good size so that you can get it trailing earlier than, say, a 1 gallon or something.
Like a 5 gallon. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they come about 6 feet right
Yeah,
out of the
5
the trumpet
gallons.
vines too.
Yeah. So that'll give you a good start. And how many vines are you planning on placing here?
Here we've got them at 6 feet on center
6 feet on
along this 36-foot run, and here we've got 4 of them to complete a 16-foot run.
And that's the red trumpet vine?
Yeah, I think they come in different colors.
Yeah, the red
whites
one is
and-
more aggressive.
Is that more aggressive
than the blue?
than the-
It's quite a big vine.
Actually, there we have it.
Yes, Lisa.
6 feet on center might be a little close for that.
For
it's
that
gonna-
particular vine.
Do you agree? Could be a maintenance issue. I'm always a fan of planting plants instead of fencing, so I think you could accomplish the same thing unless you needed a non-permeable wall by planting an upright column or fast-growing shrub, and you could even alternate 5 and 15 gallon to save cost, but cost of wood fencing is a lot, so that's my feeling on it. Or even just a landscape solution other than one monotonous thing.
Fortunately, we've got the fence there, so we're looking to use it and put the posts up at the same spacing as the vines, and I think that will reduce the amount of work that needs to go in that fence. I think it could reinforce the fence as well.
I'd like to say something. I think, it looks to me like what you're explaining is that the view shed is a little bit over. So where this gentleman's parents live, there could be some additional height and kind of just variation. And it seems like you could do the fence, you could break it up a little bit, you could not have a vine in certain spots and then just put a tree, shrub. But there's also the concern, I don't know how the neighbors would feel if it was too tall because of the solar. It's on the west side, so, But I agree with you that it's kind of monotonous, just going straight across on the fence.
Yeah, they were concerned about that.
Yeah. Seems like they could break it up a bit. You could break it up a bit. And maybe talk with them about how that sun is going to be affected in their backyard.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ryan.
I don't want to comment on the landscaping, but as far as the architectural goes, I think we already pretty much approved the architectural aspect other than the final detailing in the color board.
Yeah,
So I don't think we really need to comment on that as far as, on that respect. So that's all I needed to say about that.
And you have not come forth with your Tier 2 stormwater
No.
management yet? Okay,
No.
so that's to come. So he's asking for project design, review, right. Approval is requested.
But I'm just really here for
But you're just here
comments.
for
I'm going to come back,
comments. Okay.
and I'm going to bring everything. But this is an important issue for the owners, so they wanted to proceed after they kind of knew where they were headed, and this
Okay.
tells me a great deal here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like you're on the right track, and given some of the comments that have been made by our other landscape board members, that perhaps they can infuse the backyard with a few other shrubs and trees to lessen the monotony of just the single vine. So we make a motion on this, I take it, but he's not really asking for a design review. No, so we just send him forward.
Madam Chair,
with
you could just
positive comments.
continue him indefinitely
Okay.
with comments, which is you support the landscape design as mentioned, or indicate more specifics on what was said on the landscaping.
Okay. All right. All right. Why don't you girls say something then? Why don't you reiterate and put it very clearly so he has some direction?
I move to continue the project indefinitely for 2 weeks. Can you say that? To the full board of the Single Family Design Board. We find that the current approach to screening is acceptable, with comments that breaking up the green fence line with punctuating with a couple of varying height trees or shrubs would be advisable. Anything else?
Okay. Sounds good.
That's it.
Okay, great. All in favor of that motion? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, and one abstain. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, our next project is 20 Los Alturas Circle. Let me give this to the one with the comments. The minutes from the last meeting you'll want to pass back to. Or do you want to? And this is a continued concept review. Second concept review, comments only. The project requires environmental assessment, staff hearing officer review for requested zoning modifications, and a public works encroachment permit for work in the public right-of-way. The project was last reviewed on August 27th, 2012. Welcome, and can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Paul Zink, and I'm the architect with the project. And with me is my landscape architect, Jamie Pierce.
Aha.
Take your badge off, even if you don't mind. There also is some updated 20 closest homes survey information, because we did make the house smaller. So if you can pass that around, if staff can bring that around. There are 3 points, just like the last time, that we'll talk about. One having to do...
Oh,
Oops.
excuse me, just one
minutes.
minute. Yeah, let's read through the
minutes.
minutes.
So our last meeting minutes were August 27th, correct? So at the... There, it's on. Okay, so at the August 27th meeting, there was public comment, and then there was a motion by the board to include the following items continued indefinitely to the board. Restudy the site wall and consider a separate, smaller pool enclosure fence or wall. 2, study an alternative to the existing retaining wall on Los Alturas Circle and on Los Alturas Road. 3, the board cannot support the size, scale, and bulk of the proposed house at 94% FAR. Applicant to reduce the FAR closer to 85% guideline and consider an architectural solution to appear more as a one-story residential design or an alternative split-level design to study other designs of homes in the Los Alturas Circle area. 4, careful consideration is to be given to the location of any exterior decks. 5, consideration of the new design to take into consideration tree relocations or tree removals. Motion was made by Sweeney, second by Zimmerman, passed on a 5-0 action.
Okay, thank you. And now, any staff comments on this project?
Not yet, because I haven't gotten to the staff hearing officer level.
I see.
But I'm hoping after today I can get enough positive comments to move on to that square of this
Okay.
game. Can we get the revised FAR calcs?
Okay.
Just pass them around. We don't need to go over them. No. The 11 by 17 color green rectangle. Anyways, as she looks it up, one thing that was in the minutes that in our discussion that wasn't mentioned in the minutes was the word Cliff May. So I just want to trigger your
May.
memory on that.
Okay. Oh. Are we having technical difficulties? Oh, so everyone should speak up then.
If I can have that other one, because they're not the same.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about
This
that.
one was revised 10, 11, 12.
No. What it is this one takes care of the FAR based upon the FAR. We are the second largest FAR. This one is based upon the actual square footage, and so we are the 10th largest. And all I'm showing you is that we updated it, we lowered the square footage of the house, we got rid of the upper level that was in concern. Now I can pass that out.
Thank you.
Just so that you can see what our magic number is. 89%, I think it's somewhere down there. 89.3. So that's that. 3 points that I want to talk about. One is the tree removal, because that has to deal with our site planning. Second, sorry, can I continue?
Yes, please continue.
Second
And
issue.
It's not really, I don't know if that's advisable, but okay.
Second
Go ahead.
issue having to do with the site walls and the site modification. The third one is the overall size, bulk, and scale. I want to start by talking about the site wall. There was a concern about the house on Barker Pass and that our project wouldn't look like that and that we need to be cautious and concerned. And this is the project, and this is the proximity of the wall, landscaping, and the house behind it. What I wanted to show was our condition using the same CARS scale. There is currently a green construction fence. It's 6 feet tall, but I cannot say it's going to be where we're proposing our fence. I'm going to guess that our fence is further back from that. But that gives you a proximity of the scale that we're talking about. Our condition is not like the Barker Pass condition. And then just having to deal with the staff hearing officer. When we ask for special permission, they always say you have to have unique site conditions, and also is it a benefit that other people in the neighborhood currently enjoy. And the houses were built in a different era. Our neighbor happens to have a wall here surrounding their pool and landscaping. There's no contention about it, but what we're asking for is in a similar condition to what our next door neighbor has, except our scale is a lot less smaller than this, and is definitely smaller than the Barker Pass condition. So I wanted to discuss that. Here's these. So I'll go to the overall site plan. I did make a change to the site plan that we did move the wall back, allowing for more landscaping. I did not update the landscape plan because basically in concept it's the same thing as we wanted to do before. So now this wall got moved back, so we're 2.5 feet away, so I can have large landscaping at this point. And then here, this element, 21 feet to the actual pavement. And then this wall here. The technicality, as you know, is when you have a wall that's greater than 3.5 feet in the front yard setback, my front yard setback being way here, and then 10 feet back is this section here. So this area needs the mod because I have a wall that's greater than 3.5 feet. But in reality, the reason for these mods is so that we don't create walled-in communities. There is such significant landscaping that's going to be planted here that this wall won't feel like it's a walled-in community. And then once we bend this corner, I took it back up to 6 feet all the way around to this point. But from this line all the way over to here, it's only 5 feet because that's all that we have to have for a pool enclosure. Before I was asking for 6 feet. So I lowered the wall, and then this area, it's technically in the city right away. We've already talked through the different people at Public Works, and they're going to grant us a temporary use permit. If they ever decide to make the road bigger, we have to let go of this area. But this follows the existing paving, the existing pool enclosure, hardscape around the pool, just so that you can see this was the way the pool was before. It was done in a different era. My neighbor's house is over here. They have a wall. It is also in violation. It's not really a violation. It's an as-built condition. It was built when the rules were different. So we're getting a permit. So this is our mods. Just to refresh your memory, we have 3 mods. The first mod is that we're going to be touching this wall. This currently has a fence that is a guardrail that's 3 feet tall, and we're going to make it 42 inches. And so as soon as we make an existing wall taller than it really is, that's mod number 1. Mod number 2 is we're asking for this wall to be 5 feet tall. It's continuation that becomes our pool enclosure. Mod number 3 has to do with this pool equipment in this zone. Moving on to the architecture and how we changed the floor plan. We floated an idea with the neighbors that didn't go over too well, in which that we picked up the lower level and kept it at the same height as the pool deck. In doing this, we were thinking maybe we could save the tree, but this grew this element because this was a 2-story section. This grew taller and didn't fly with the neighbors, so we pushed this back down to what we originally had planned. We are planning on digging this down by 3 feet and lowering this down, tucking this room underneath, and having a 1-story section here. So really, it's a 1-story house with a daylight basement. We have a slight retaining wall that comes across here, just so we can have a nice window here, and then landscaping at that point. All of this grading is existing. And I'd like to get some comments on the landscape plan if I get the green light to go on to the staff hearing officer. We were always planning on adding some additional oak trees. There's a small one right here. And then on the landscape plan, we added some, I think it's olive trees right here at this point, to restore what was lost on this corner, because there's concern about the overall height of this element. As the ground goes down, the grade here is 53, the grade here is 60. So there's a 7-foot grade difference right here. The intersection is at a lower point. We are planting trees here to restore what was lost in the fire, because right now the only thing that's here are 2 telephone poles. One is a redwood and one is a palm. On the upper floor, which is really the main level, there's an existing grade right here, 770.0. These are things that came up in conversation with the neighbors, so I just want to bring it up to everyone's attention. This grade right here is 770. It comes right through here in the garage. Here's my garage slab coming across. So I made the assumption that that's 770. Now, with that knowledge, here's 770. The finished floor of the house is 770.3. That's this whole level, and then the other floor is underneath there. The previous house profile, you can see right here, its house was at about 770.3. Its roof plan, just so that we can see, looked like this. If you don't mind, there was a slight ridge right here, even though there's a hip and a hip, but there's also a ridge. And I made the assumption that it was an 8-foot plate at 4.5, 4 and 12 roof pitch. I'm having a 9-foot plate with a 3 and 12 roof pitch here. This corner right here represents this corner right here. Just to give you some information. Then when we get to the elevations, I did some additional number crunching. Before, you'll notice, actually I have 3 of these, so I'll pass these out. That's there, that's for you guys. On the elevations that I submitted, I show this as 25 feet. I ended up meeting with the structural engineer, and we designed some of the roof framing elements, and I'm able to bring it down to 24.4 for this top of this, what I'm going to call my proposed roof over the master bedroom, with a 9-foot plate using 3 and 12. The existing house at 4 and 12 was 14 foot, about 8 inches above the finished floor. We're going to be 13.6 above the finished floor. I took the whole house, if you remember, and moved the whole house this direction, because right now the staircase that comes down to this existing pool is like 1 foot 3 inches from the edge of that, the water. I didn't design the pool, but that's just this condition right here. It's just like right on the edge. So I moved the whole house, or not the whole house, I moved this whole element over by 3 feet 4 inches. That slid all of this out. And that's how I designed this section as being my master bedroom wing with a bedroom in the front. So these are those heights that came up with this element. I want to talk about the architecture. Architecture is 1960s Cliff May without looking too much like a Howard Johnson's. The style of architecture, I'm going to have some beams about 4 feet on center, and then we'll have 9.5-inch TJIs on top of that. The overhang on the side is going to go from 2 feet to like maybe 4 feet at the top. It has a slight rake coming across the top. The overhang on the other side is 4 feet, which is why I lowered it to 3 and 12 roof pitch so I can have a longer overhang with these beams coming down at 4 feet on center. So that's the architecture here. This roof element is correct, not this one. I had a valley that didn't flush out with the rain. This is the view that faces the city. I have a hard roof where my covered patio is with some skylights. This is the master bedroom area with a deck facing towards the ocean. And then this is the site wall, going from 6 feet, once I'm beyond my magic point, to 5 feet around the pool. I'll be 3 feet on the pool deck side, and then this area is where the pool equipment is, and if necessary, I can always take a couple stairs down and lower this section to hide all the pool equipment, because now I've lowered my wall by a foot. And if you don't have a problem, maybe I could pull this up by 2 feet, because I already have a hard wall on the other side, so I'm not really adding too much mass, but just thought of that. So that's the architecture. This is the stair window. This is the lower bedroom, the site wall. And you can see I dotted in what the site wall would be along the property line. So I want to go over a little bit of the landscaping because I think it's important. Don't worry about the floor plan, this part, because this has changed significantly. But all this planting has. We have the existing oak trees, the existing oak tree and the new oak trees that I was proposing, plus the new olive trees, to create this screening that I want to save from this element. This is the play area wrapping around to the front yard, the walkways coming up, and the driveway. Then there's an existing avocado tree that we plan on maintaining, and there's an existing hedge that our neighbor has planted that we're planning on maintaining. So that is my presentation. Any questions?
Okay, well, we'll open up to public comment. Here we have the residents of 20 La Salle Tourist Circle, and it looks like Carolyn Vogt.
And I gave my
Vogt.
time.
Vogt.
I don't have any comments.
Pardon me?
I gave my time.
Yes, and you're giving your time to your husband, Don. Okay, so 4 minutes to comment on this project.
Well, you can see I didn't come with a stack of handouts and everything, so that either means I'm unprepared or I'm much more satisfied.
Oh, thank you.
First, both Carolyn and I would like to thank the board for their attention to this at the last meeting. It's been a great deal to us and our neighbors. And I would like to thank Paul for his response. And Paul has been very good about keeping us kind of informed here. We just really don't have much at this point to say or to really comment negatively about. The height of the house is, Paul said that the end is 13, the middle is 17, puts it still as the highest house in the neighborhood on the highest lot. That's a design issue that you folks can take a look at. From our standpoint, it's not a major thing. We're not, I can't speak for the neighbor across the street, directly across the street, who is really downhill from this property, and what that's going to look like from their standpoint. But clearly, the new design is much more compatible with the neighborhood. And in fact, there is a little passing wave at the how unerrant design of our house next door, because he's done a little bit of a prow on this one. So it does match up. And Paul has already commented on the hedge where we've put a couple of there are 7 podocarpus that we put on that property, which was abandoned essentially for the 3 years until it was recently purchased by Mr. Rudd. And in order to start protecting our property from that property, since everything was burned down, we put podocarpus from the front to the back. And we had, because our property actually is built on the property line, we put 7 of them on the Rudd property, and we are maintaining the irrigation for that. We're also maintaining the height of those. So we would like to have those recognized. It's going to make a unified division between the properties. We will continue to maintain the height on those. I notice on their landscaping plan, that there really isn't any specific planting planned for that corner, which would be the southeast corner behind the avocado tree. And I'm glad to hear Paul mention that the avocado tree will be maintained. It was burned, but we've managed to kind of reconstitute it, and it's now appears to be a pretty healthy tree. So we're interested in that particular area because that's the kind of opening between our property and the next property, where our property, the pool deck is right there, and we're just looking for adequate screening. We're very happy now that the floor level will be at, what is it, 770.3, 770 or and 0.3, which is basically, again, that's kind of our pool deck level. So the only other thing that we'd kind of like to know about is what happens in the process of the construction of a building when changes are being made. I don't care what they do inside this, but I would not like to see major changes in the exterior dimensions, both horizontally and particularly vertically. And what's the process that has to be gone through, and are neighbors ever involved in that if change orders are brought up to the builder? I don't want to come back and find that the ground floor level is suddenly another foot higher than anticipated. And I don't want to hear it as an as-built, get an approval on it. So is there some way that we can be kept advised of what goes on? How does that happen?
Well, basically, the building department will be watching that. So,
Well, I'm hoping that everything will come out the way it shows on on the plans. The plans are fine with us.
Yes.
Chair, just to answer the question, that's typically a concern that the building gets constructed as approved by this board.
Right.
And so we review the plans right prior to permit issuance to make sure it's consistent with this approval. And in the field, we do rely on the inspector to note when they deviate from construction. And if they do, then there is a review after final. If you've indicated that you're an interested party, you will receive an agenda indicating there's a request to change the design. So hopefully you've added a request to speak slip, and we place you as an interested party.
We are.
Yes,
I'm
so you should get
a
right.
very interested party. But again, I'd like to thank the board for their work on this, and thank Paul for coming back with something that works for the neighbors.
And thank you for your comments, sir. Appreciate you being here. Okay, so we'll open it up to questions from the board. I think that's mine. Sorry. That's all right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll
Mr.
start.
Sweeney.
Let's see. On the 4-foot overhang on your architecture, I'm assuming because of high fire, I'm assuming based on what I saw in the sketch, that's a heavy timber.
It's actually going to be 6x beams, and I plan on using glulam yellow cedar. That's the thinner veneer, so then I can custom make this kind of shape that I have going down here.
Okay.
And then there'd be plaster for the soffits.
And then what are you anticipating the window types are going to be? Is it clad or?
They'll be aluminum clad,
Okay.
and right now I don't show a sill piece underneath here. Marvin makes one with a brick molding, so I would go with that. I wouldn't try to add a piece of stone or add something because we really didn't do that in the 60s. It was pretty a clean window sill treatment.
And then the chimney caps. What's your thought there? What are those going to be?
I have no idea. That's the last thing on my to-do list.
Just because they always kind of stand up there, and we got to think about them. And then specifically to your to the site plan, but I guess because you were showing us some photographs early on of the exterior wall, and so the bottom of that wall is. Am I reading 759? 759. The top of wall is 764.
Add 5 feet to it. Hopefully the math works.
Okay, and then the other side is down again?
No, it'll be about the same. I'm not really, well, I'm not positive. I think if anything, I'm going to cut this down, then we'll bowl back up because there's no reason
Okay.
to cut this the whole distance.
So you're going to kind of swoop up
But even
like
if
that.
I hate to say 12 feet, even if I'm 6 feet on this side, that doesn't matter as much. But I really haven't worked out the details. I don't want to cut too much because then I don't want to have that much export, but I will have export because I'm digging out for the basement.
Okay. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about the protocarpus that was mentioned? That's part of the
We don't have it shown here, and my only hesitation is the fire department. And we will keep it if the fire department says we can keep it, but I'm not going to volunteer it up front without, because then I might get locked into something that we can't guarantee. You have anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree with you. I mean, we need the fire
And
department to.
we have lots of photographs this direction that show what it is. There's a wall that's right on the property line. This building is approved on the property line with its roof element. We can put planting here, but then the fire department might say you have planting against a building.
Too close to the tree.
And then my final question is on the venting. If we go back to your elevations, on the venting of the attic and so forth.
I have an answer. We're not going to have an attic. It's Icynene and the 9.5-inch TJIs.
Oh, okay. So you don't need to end up with vents or something.
No vents in there. That's going to be a vertical hardy board siding
Okay.
for look only.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have,
Yes, Mr. Zipper.
well, let's look at the site plan again, where you have the 5-foot wall. So we have a what, a 2-to-1 grade coming up to the wall?
It's not
All
even
the
2
way
to
around.
1. 3 to 1?
Okay, so as the grades go down, do you plan on sloping the wall down with the grade to keep it at 5 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
And it'll slope down up to this point and then slope back up to 6 feet.
I was wondering, so this is the railing up above here,
That railing is right here along this wall.
and then what do you plan on doing here then?
This is going to be a CMU block wall. This wall has to rake up because the ground naturally rakes up. Let me move the other sheet. My wall always has to be 5 feet above grade so it's not climbing. And so it becomes kind of funky in this one corner. So this wall has to rake up. But this was going to be a plastered wall with plantings in front of it. And then this existing brick wall, we're planning on plastering over it, and then we're going to have a new railing where that wooden railing is right now.
So how high are these walls?
The walls will be 5 feet from the dirt, which is the existing dirt. It'll be 3 feet from this existing hardscape around the pool. And because it's not 30 inches, I don't need a guardrail. I can just point out one thing. The existing condition is that there was a couple of steps that go down here. That shows how natural the grade is. We're letting go of these steps and we're taking this corner here and putting the wall right there. That's how we came up to it. Talking to staff, staff doesn't want to see an open railing here. They'd rather see it as a hard wall. So that's how we came up with this 5 foot high block wall. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Bernie.
First of all, thank you. I think this is a good example of, people making compromises and then winding up with something that does suit the neighborhood. My only couple of quick questions, I think one is kind of self-explanatory in that the concern about the decks and the number of decks is not really an issue anymore because mostly the decks are in the back from the master
We
bedroom.
had an upper level, so this was really 3
So
stories.
this-
And we got rid of the upper level and we got rid of the upper level deck.
Okay, so that's not an issue. And then, is there any special consideration in terms of the calculations for the basement?
In this case, the basement is considered 100% because it's not enclosed. Sometimes when you have 50% of the basement lower level can be buried or subterranean, you get a 50% reduction. In this case, the way the natural grade is, I have so much of it exposed that I had to count 100% of the lower level.
Okay, thank you.
So what's the FAR?
89.3.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I concur with my fellow board member, Ms. Bernstein, that this has come a long, long ways. You've done a fantastic job, and I think this is an example where we can have a willing applicant, a architect that understands the nuances of Cliff May, and a neighborhood that is really diligently watching out. So I think this is one we can point to with some success, and so I really appreciate the effort. I think the house will look nice. I'm anxious to see what the color palette's going to be, and also anxious to see the final landscape color palette. I think that will be important. In terms of the FAR, yeah, it's more than our guideline, but given the circumstances of the size of this lot, its location, what was there before, et cetera, I'm comfortable with the 89%. It's not 85, but it's reasonable. And I certainly appreciate the effort on the decks. I think that got it under control. And so overall, I'm pretty happy. I think we're close to there, but obviously we still have some details to look at and colors and so forth.
I have one comment.
Yes.
I think Cliff may be upset because there's no ridge skylights.
Skylights.
I think he needs
At least I'm taking my beams this direction, without a ridge beam in the middle.
Any other comments? No? All right, so who would like to? Oh, yes.
More things. So do we know what the material of the wall is proposed to be?
It'll be a block wall that's plastered. See, I mean, it might be an adobe color because I don't need to bring attention to it. How dark of a brown, I don't know yet.
Okay.
If I can
We'll
get
find it.
some
We'll see it
comments
again.
about the wall and moving on to the staff hearing officer.
All right. Anyone would like to just
Madam Chair,
formulate a
I find that the wall that he's proposing is acceptable. I think before you get to the hearing officer, it'd probably be good if you just define a little bit more of the grades on each side to make sure the hearing officer kind of understands what it looks like. You might even offer him a little section through there so he can, particularly I think Jim's comment, so everybody kind of clearly understands what the grade slope is in general along here. Because if you look at those photographs, once that current planting goes away, you're correct. It's really not like our Barker Pass situation where we had a steep incline. Yeah, I think it's that other one. No, that one over there. Yeah. Kind of try to read through the planting there. Yeah, it does raise, but it's not dramatic. So I think if you just, when you get to the hearing officer, make sure that that's clearly articulated, and I think you'll be fine. I don't have any real particular problem with the little place where it goes out in the public right-of-way, because that's historically how it had to deal with the existing deck, and that's how it was originally built. So I think we could probably, at least in my mind, find that acceptable.
Okay, would anyone like to formulate a motion then? This is comments only. We need to give our positive comments to the staff hearing officer.
So, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we provide positive comments to the staff hearing officer, that the project...
No. She was whispering to me about pool equipment, too, the comment of, because there's three mods, and one of them has to do about the pool equipment, but that's the existing location of the pool equipment. We are...
It's that little piece right here.
Yeah. Am I correct?
The part that's coming across the property line here that is mod number 3, correct? The wall.
Okay. So, shall we do the motion in terms of the modifications? So, mod number 1 was for...
Existing increasing the railing height on existing walls.
We find that acceptable. Mod 2 was for the...
A height greater than 3.5 feet within 10 feet of the front yard setback.
We find that acceptable the way it's presented. And mod 3 is for the...
Location of the pool equipment in the front yard setback.
And we find that acceptable based on the historic location of the previous house. We find in general that the house is in compliance with the adjacent neighborhood in terms of compatibility, that the concept landscape plan is incompatible with the context fabric of the neighborhood landscape, that in general the floor area ratio of 89.3% is acceptable. The board does recognize that it does fall beyond the recommended guidelines of 85%. That the board would request upon project returning to the board that color palette, both the architecture and landscape be provided. And in general, we find the approach to the project acceptable and far improved from the first presentation.
Thank you. Oh, we have a second?
second it.
All right, we've got Brian Miller seconding, and all in favor, say aye.
Under discussion.
Plus,
I
aye.
mean, don't we just, we do the thing and then we talk about the proposal and then we vote?
Okay,
Yeah?
well,
I just was wondering
Yeah, we
on
have
one,
motion,
yeah.
and then you have discussion, and then you
Right,
take a
so
vote.
under discussion, so the second thing about the wall, is it fine to leave it open-ended and say we recommend that the staff hearing officer says it's, you know, modified is okay, or do we have to say up to 5 feet?
I think I made the motion that it's acceptable given what the applicant has presented, which is 5 feet.
But what if that gets changed between now and then?
We can't change it, making it any lower, because I need to protect the swimming pool.
What about higher though?
I would love to have it as a 6-foot wall and have the staff hearing officer knock me down to 5, because that's all I technically need or required to have. But I can't do a wall that's 4.5 feet, because then I'm left with a pool that's vulnerable to little children.
So maybe a technical question to staff.
you're on.
So a technical question to staff. If he gets to the hearing officer, we're saying 5 feet is okay based on the motion that's on the table right now. If he gets to the staffing hearing officer and the staff hearing officer makes some change, does that come back to us for our review in terms of the height?
Not necessarily. It'll come back after the staff hearing officer, and we'll inform you if there was a condition placed on the project. That is the concern that it would get taller,
That it might get higher?
and they're going to be aware that you supported the 5-foot height.
Yes.
So I would doubt that it would get higher.
Okay.
That we will advise you if that in fact happens.
Okay. So,
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
so
then,
Madam Chair, I would call for the question.
all right then all in favor? Aye. All opposed? You can't vote.
I'm in favor.
All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Well, good luck, and
We'll see you once we finish the staff
yeah,
hearing
we'll see
officer.
you back when it's all said and done. So we'll take this. We'll keep the one that was on the camera.
It doesn't matter to both.
Okay, and then here's this and this.
Paul, you can take the rest of them. We're just going to keep one.
How about, I think we're going to keep these two for the record. All right, and now we have a discussion item. T-Fire projects. Review and discussion of approved projects in the Single-Family Design Board City process by Jaime Limon, Senior Planner.
Madam Chair, we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to put on and hit the lights, so you'll be able to get a little tour of the T5 post-construction of homes.
Oh, goody.
And then we're going to end up with a couple of questions for you as far as discussion. Here we are.
Did you bring a popcorn?
We have cookies.
Okay. So I don't know if you remember that we did receive I would call it a complaint about one of the homes that was being constructed, and the concern that there wasn't sufficient review of the home and how it impacted the existing structure next door. And I believe it was on Sherman Road, and that happens to be a sort of unique street. It's sort of like a little cul-de-sac dead-end street, and I focused on Conejo Road and getting down to that area so you could have sort of a walking tour, as you say. In this case, it was a car tour of the area. I happened to have been blocked by, there was a repaving job going on last week when I went out there, so I didn't get to see some of the homes on Las Alturas. However, I think this is sufficiently to give you some indication of the types of homes that have been constructed since 2009. Now, as you recall, in 2009, when post-construction, post-fire, the city agreed to have the rebuild process go through a sort of an expedited review, which consisted of a pre-application staff appointment process where the property owners could come down and speak to staff and quickly get an assessment of whether or not they had a non-conforming situation and whether they can rebuild in the same footprint, essentially. And then we also set up early consultation reviews with a form of teams where the Single Family Design Board, along with some volunteers, were participating in a 3-team member reviews of these early on and gave advice and direction on some of these concept reviews. And then we also decided that the process could allow for a consent review process. And of course, the consent review process consists of 1 or 2 Single Family Design Board members. And the direction essentially was if there were concerns at the consent calendar that the project would be forwarded to the full board. We had a review process and handouts available to the public to give them direction on our steps. We felt it was a pretty straightforward process. This is the sort of the post-construction handout that we gave both the Jesucita Fire and T-Fire rebuild process, and essentially this calls out how these reviews would occur and how it would be expedited through building permit issuance. And we believe it's been pretty successful. Over the 150 properties that were damaged, 110 properties have been reviewed by the city. 102 were placed on consent calendar, so that was a tremendous sort of assistance to allow those to come forward on a consent review process. 36 rebuild projects involved zoning modifications, so essentially 1 out of 3 needed zoning modifications. And of those 110, 8 were placed on full board. So as you can see, it's been cited towards the consent review calendar, and maybe that's part of the success in sort of the failure. And I'll explain the failure part of it because some of the construction out in the field has some questions about compatibility. There's such a variation in styles. Maybe that's a good thing because you don't want a generic neighborhood. And then one of the interesting thing about I looked at some of the statistics. We have this all on a spreadsheet, and it gives you the whole cycle of when they applied, when they attained single-family design, project design approval, when they had final approval, and eventually when they had an approval of a landscape plan, and when they actually got a building permit issued and inspection. And the process essentially is averaged about 70 to 80 days to get a single-family design board of final approval, and that incorporates the time necessary for the applicant to go out and finish complete construction drawings. So that's pretty quick, we believe. And another essentially 60 to 90 days to get a building permit. Now, there were variations, and obviously we learned there were some difficulties in the first applicants, so I think the project reviews got easier as time went on. So I'm going to start you at Conejo Road. Some of these are still under construction. Again, most of the time I'm at the roadway looking up or looking down. And so I'm going to fly through this. I didn't identify the addresses. I think that's just our process when we do post-construction evaluation. If you do want to comment on it, we don't want to jump in on people's homes and say what we like and don't like. I'm just giving you this as a perspective. And if you have questions along the way, you can interrupt me, but I'm going to go and proceed through. You have some, again, tiered, stepped retaining walls up to the home. Most of the homes did come back a little larger, but there were some exceptions where they just decided to build what they had before. Here's on Stanwood Drive. I think Mr. Thompson in the audience knows this house. That's his house. It's all been constructed, and we think it came out beautifully. Here you have perspective, too. One of the things that is difficult to evaluate on a submittal is how it sits on the topography of the site. Some are more visible from below as they are from above. Here you see from the road, they don't stick out as much, right? They're sunken down as the grade goes down. Here you have some different styles that were constructed. View down at this happens to be Sherman Road below. You'll see some of these homes as I go down. This is one viewed from Conejo Road and viewed from below on Sherman Road. Some are pretty simple, pretty low level. Some decided to build in the Spanish style. Different styles, contemporary styles. Still building. Here you are, again, the variation between what's next door and what's downslope. Here you see some of it. Wide variety of styles. Here you see again viewed from above Conejo, then the road drops down below, and you can see how it is of a higher height as you see it from the bottom of the road. That's what's facing the street. I don't know if that was the angle that was proposed when it was reviewed, but here you have, again, not very modest a view from the street, but as you go down the road, you see the bulk and scale of it as it slopes down the hill. Now we're getting on Sherman Road, so this is what I sort of wanted to focus in on. And yes, these all the homes were damaged, and they were originally designed by one architect. I believe it was mostly, I think, contemporary architecture, some variations of those. But now this is the one that I wanted to point out. The Sherman Road is the home on Stanwood Drive below is right below the one that's being framed here. And so their view, if you see the right two top photos, that's what's looming above them. And so obviously it sort of impacts their view of that side of the home. The left side is, again, how it's viewed from the straight on, and they're below again. The downside is the far right. You can see it's pretty nice architecture. And this was one of our early ones approved, I believe, in 2010. So maybe it didn't get the full review or the impact review. So there you see it again. Still on Sherman Road as you look up the hill towards the mountainside. Here's one here. This has the one that you saw earlier with panels on the roof. And these are all next door to each other. And this one's on the end here. Of course, we don't have landscaping, so landscaping can turn these into more of a lush sort of view. So maybe we'll take some more photographs after the landscaping comes in. A nice home on Conejo Road. Conejo Road. Standing seam roof, I think, metal seam roof. Here's one on Los Alturas Road. Again, you can see that as you go up the road, you can see the side of the home. This is looking out towards the ocean views. And from the street on the bottom right, you don't see the height scale because it goes down the hill. Here's one on Coyote Road. Nailed that one. Okay. And here's the one that was about 10,000 square feet. It was allowed to be reconstructed. They had a 10,000 square foot home, and they basically built a basement area floor level that was originally not usable space, but so they kept the same footprint. So some of the neighbors would thought that this would come out too large, but you really don't see a lot of it from the road. So maybe you can see it from other parts of the city, but I haven't sort of examined that. So that sort of is the quick preview, and really the question is, do we really want to have anything change now? Because we feel that There's still about 40, 45 homes that may come back in for additional review. And do we want them to continue in the same review process? In other words, they stay in, well, let's turn on the lights here, if you don't mind. Thank you. I know that some have expressed concerns about them
houses that have never even begun the start of a design?
Right. There are some homes that have made initial consultations or applications. It would probably not be those homes if they've already had one single-family design review. But of course, you could change that. You could say, no, from now on, we want them on a full board, and let the board actually decide that they belong on consent. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's some that have not applied, and some still in the process.
Because it seemed like the whole reason why it had been streamlined like this was to get people back into their homes. So if they're not in a big hurry to rebuild their homes, then it does seem like I can understand why you'd want to take another look at it.
That's exactly the question. Obviously, we were reacting to what we perceived as having an influx of applications that would come in, and we didn't want our process to delay their ability to come in and get a building permit or get through our process. So yes, we have more properties now that have decided either not to build or to sell because they've now taken 3 years. I know some property owners did take a while to settle their insurance issues. But the ordinance on nonconformity, for example, has expired. And so now they would have to come forward and request an application to consider complying with new regulations. And we also have new owners that have acquired the property, so the hardship isn't as apparent there, right? They were not the victims. They acquired the property. But we have been reluctant to change the process staff-wise. We felt it was direction of council that we continue the process until all the homes had been rebuilt. So at this point, it's up to this board. You set your own rules and procedures, and if we have issues with it, we'll raise those issues to you. And again, if we do change things, I would probably send some to the city council advising them of the change to see if they agree.
It would seem to me, from this dialogue right now, that it would seem more appropriate if the original owner got the special exemption. When you have a new owner buy the property and they take advantage of this, it seems they're taking advantage of something where other people in other areas of the city who don't have this advantage buying it would. So I think it's actually abusing the setup.
Right.
So I would recommend that it would be only applied to the original owner and not a new owner. Once the new owner takes control of the property, they have to go through the same process as everyone else. I mean, I think that would be only fair.
I have a question. There was 150 properties that are under the city's jurisdiction. 110 have somehow touched the process at this point, based on your slide.
That's correct.
So, in essence, there are 40 properties that have not appeared yet. So that's essentially the number we're talking about. What to do with those 40?
Right. And do you want to change anything with the ones that are being reviewed?
So addressing the 40, it seems to me I agree with Brian. And also, someone might bring the question up, well, if the property owner, whether they're new or the original property owner, wants to come back and build the exact same house on the exact same footprint, I'd still think that at this point it's been 6 years since the fire.
No, that's not.
Fire was November of
4 now.
4 years, sorry. November of 2009. Even in that case, I'm thinking they ought to come back to the full board at this point. Because the architecture might change. The footprint might be the same, but the architecture changes, the height changes, the proportions change, and that's, I think, where we may have some struggles with in terms of compatibility with the neighborhood. So I'd like to see those new applications come into the full board, regardless of whether the footprint has changed or not, and if it's a new owner. I think if it's an existing owner and they finally got their insurance settled or whatever, and they're not exceeding their original footprint, then probably that one could remain in consent. But I think everyone else ought to come here. And then if there are, beyond the 40, ones that haven't come to review officially at the consent calendar for concept review, if they haven't got to that point, then those ought to come to the board. At least that's my thought.
But you're not suggesting that if they started already on the consent calendar, that they be taken off the consent calendar?
Right. If in other words, if they've come, had a conversation with staff or whatever, that's fine. Then they ought to come to full board. But if they've already gone to consent calendar with an initial look at, then I think they're already, in my opinion, they're in the system and could be penalized.
And I think that, there's always the opportunity for the reviewers on consent to kick it up to the full board. And perhaps now they'll have a little bit sharper eye to it, and look at the neighborhood harder than it was looked at in this particular case. Other than that, I agree with Fred on that they should come to the full board, anyone that hasn't started the process.
In agreement with that the new buyers should be, there should be more strict requirements.
In general, on the challenge that this board has with regards to neighborhood compatibility, when we deal with this sort of geographic terrain, I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges. We saw this on, I think, some recent projects that are on the west side of town over by the Mesa, where we have similar geographic configurations where we've got a lot of steep lots. We've got some houses that from the street level, they look pretty benign, 1 story high, but you get out in front of them across the canyon and look back, and they're several stories dropping down the hillside. And I think that one of our challenges as a board is being able to step back and have the opportunity to view those sites from far away. And I'm thinking of one we've had recently that was on a dead-end street. You really can't see the property from a couple of houses away, et cetera, in several locations. But boy, you can certainly see the property from the freeway downtown and below, because you're looking up at the Riviera. And I'm just wondering, and this is a kind of a legal question, in a lot of cases, the complaints we get are from property owners that are across the canyon. They can see it, but we can't see it from the public right-of-way. But there's a collective. I know we're not under the auspices of being able to protect specific private views, but we're supposed to be looking at compatibility for neighborhood views. And in some cases, those neighborhood views are not necessarily from the public right-of-way. So the legal question is, if we felt as a board we needed to be able to see that particular property from an array of neighbors on an opposite canyon, is there a way we could be allowed to go on to private property to get that view perspective? How does that happen, or can that happen?
The access to private property is different than requesting the applicant to provide that information. So you know, having been around for the city for many years, I know that when we had projects in the hillside where we were concerned about the prominent nature of the home and whether it would be visible from different parts of the city, we actually asked for simulations, photo simulations, where they actually would take a photo of the canyon or the hillside from other angles and place the home on the site in a photo simulation, so you would get an understanding of whether the architectural style was appropriate and or the spill down effect for the hillside home. And in some cases, the Planning Commission, I'm aware of, has conditioned the homes to be of a certain size limit associated with subdivisions, and that they be earth tone and color. So that, you know, the white prominent hillside homes that Santa Barbara is famous for sometimes don't work on a hillside that is prominent. So yes, you can request that additional information, but I would put that on the applicant. I don't expect this Board of Commission to have to go out around different parts with binoculars and try to figure this out.
And then just kind of following through on that, a lot of, and I think you pointed out in your presentation, a lot of the circumstance is that we're here to look at the combination of both architecture and landscaping, because in the final end of the game is that when these houses are built and the landscaping matures, we're looking at the fabric of the neighborhood as it relates to how architecture and landscape come together. That's really, in many ways, that kind of makes the neighborhood. We have neighborhoods with some parts of our city with lots of tall hedges and lots of mature trees that have been there for many, many years. We have other neighborhoods that are relatively new, don't have a big tree canopy, et cetera. So, again, part of our challenge, I think, is always having to visualize what this stuff may look like when it gets to a level of maturity that we don't have the opportunity to see early on. And I think probably the more that we can encourage applicants to allow us to see that, the better. And I think it also goes back to our previous discussions on defining, when we get to the issue of story poles, making sure that we as a board define what our expectations are in detail about how the story poles are erected, what they're really going to show. And I know sometimes we've had applicants come in, well, I put a story pole up. Well, they put a 20-foot PVC pipe in the air and called it a story pole. Well, that didn't really define, in my view, what the size, scale, and bulk of the volume is going to look like. So we probably have to pay more attention when we make that request to make sure we really define what that looks like.
I want to hear from everyone if you have some input. And one of the things about the landscaping is, in fact, there was a denuding factor with these neighborhoods. A lot of trees were damaged and taken out, and so we don't have the maturity of some of the trees that help a typical neighborhood. So you have a lot of the architecture standing out there right now and very young landscaping. But what was interesting about the home that we were talking about on Sherman Road, if I can go back to see it, is that because of the architecture here, you see the top photo, the applicant below on Stanwood felt compelled to put those junipers in to try to screen. Unfortunately, she did that without city approval, and the fire department asked them to be removed. So it wasn't much of a relief to allow this property owner to try to screen that structure. And so now we have a revised landscape plan approved by the fire department that allows a hedge and maybe a tree, but not the junipers that were too close to the structures. So the high fire standards also play into trying to solve that. So it's no.
It's really tragic in a way for this
Right.
particular homeowner
Exactly.
because a hedge isn't going to do it,
Right.
clearly. And
And there are limits on the heights of hedges. as you
yeah,
know.
there are limits on the heights of hedges, and I'm just really shocked that this got by anyone where they weren't looking at the already built home below. And is that the front of that three-story home that's looking down and across, or
The front is the left photo from the street. The middle photo on the top is as viewed from the downside Stanwood home, which is the downside home,
yeah.
which is to the side of it.
So this poor soul has no recourse. In other words, they were going to have to live with these people looking down on them for all eternity. That's just tragic. Well, now I suppose they could do something if they put some trees that further onto their property. They
Well,
might be
I'm
able
going to
to
go out and take another photograph when the revised landscaping is in place, and we'll see how that changes. And then the home will be further developed also.
And what's the setback here? I mean, my gosh, they're right on top of each other.
Yeah, I don't think it's much of a setback again because of the old nature of the subdivision there. So
So this is a good reason for us to try to tighten up our scrutiny.
Well, this is what initiated the discussion. I promised you I would come back and show you some of the homes. Again, we're probably focused in on the worst example if we think that's a problem. But certainly the neighbor thought so.
The original owner, the first, that
I can look
three-story.
into that. I don't know
I was
if
just
that's
curious.
the case. Yeah, that would be interesting. I also thought that, I'll let you speak,
That's
Mr.
okay.
Miller,
Yeah.
that, we've had the NPO now in effect about 5 or 6 years, I think 2007. And we said that we would go out and look at some of these post-construction. So this happens to be an opportunity, right? The city had a major rebuild effort. But we do have an opportunity to go back and look some of the homes throughout the city to see how they turned out and the specific characteristics of size and FARs. I mean, you had a discussion earlier about whether it really matters if it's 87 or 85. And we had this exercise when we did the NPO update where we put a photo up there and said, how big do you think that FAR is? And really it does matter what it looks like because you can look at 85% and have it bad, and you look at 88% and you could swear that it doesn't look like 88% FAR. So may be doing that in the future to actually put some more photographs and put some FAR numbers so you can get a sense of when you get it right or you think you get it right or wrong. You can look at those homes and have more information. And I didn't have time to do that on these homes, but certainly when they get all completed, we'll have some more information because we are building a database.
Of architecture too, and the modern architecture as opposed to traditional architecture, and they both have a different kind of vocabulary. And to me, it seems to me the modern architecture has a less tolerant vocabulary than traditional. It's more uncompromising. But my point being, I think it's important for both the ABR and the Single Family Design Board know the history of why we were created in the first place. I mean, we look at these drawings up on the walls. There's a reason why we have this vernacular style of architecture being pushed in this community, because that's kind of the theme. And I hear a lot of conversations of a lot of architects saying, well, I'm tired of it. I want to break out and do something different. And I just feel that we need to be a little more responsible in terms of our heritage of this community. And I think one of the ways we could do that is if, they're given a history of why, what happened, what was it that really, it was the earthquake of 27, and something happened back then, or 25, that created these review boards. And Pearl Chase, I think, was a big advocate of having that happen. And I think it's a very interesting history, and I think part of that might be something that the city can look at, and, kind of giving a background of why these boards exist.
Sure. It's funny that you raise that issue because it's come up recently in some of the appeals or projects that have gone to City Council about the ABR's role with respect to architectural style selection. Both your goals and the ABR's goals includes a goal that indicates to encourage the preservation of pre-1925 and Hispanic styles of architecture. Well, one could construe that you're going to encourage that by either preserving it or promoting it. Yeah. And I think there was an understanding that Santa Barbara had a certain style of architecture, and that's something that we would want to try to promote. But it's difficult for this board and other architecture review boards to mandate architectural styles. We do want a variety in the city. And so the key question is when are you going to say this isn't the right architecture for this block or this neighborhood? And I remember some board members indicating that what you should do is look at the best examples in the neighborhood. At least that was what was being promoted. The problem when you have a neighborhood that has no examples, you sort of have a clean slate, so you have a lot more variety because people are coming in with their own preferences. And so again, where do you put modern architecture? Do you put it into a older established neighborhood that doesn't have it? introduce that into it. Maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, and that's sort of the dynamic that you have to play. But we certainly are going to have more training and orientation for board members in the future. That's been my direction by council, and we're going to get into exactly maybe doing an orientation training at one of our first meetings every year. I think that's been suggested that be done also.
Just to follow up on Brian's comment, this slide you have up is probably a good example of this issue of how we deal with contemporary architecture.
Yeah.
In my mind, this is a piece of contemporary architecture, but it also has aspects of Irving Gill. Okay.
You're right.
Now, if you go back to the problematic property, that one. That's a much different kind of contemporary architecture than the slide we were just looking at. Now, a couple of things that I'd want to see if we do the post-analysis of this particular project is, having gone up and walked through the framing, what I could, and I hadn't seen the drawings. I haven't looked at the drawings. I wasn't here when this project went through. But I could tell that on that side where the cypress are, that's the side looking towards this traditional house, there are apparently going to be some slit windows. In other words, long, horizontal, thin windows on that side. I think at the corner there may be some bigger ones, but the rest, there are a relatively few number of windows. Having said that, the windows are kind of the privacy issue. You know, if you're standing in that contemporary house, what can you see looking down on the traditional house? And on the traditional house, what can you see looking up through the windows into the contemporary house? So obviously, that's one thing we'd want to see once this is completed. But setting just the view windows aside, just the sheer mass and bulk of that contemporary house is problematic, regardless of the windows. So I think those are the two things one would want to look at in any post-analysis once this project's completed. And then, of course, how do you allow working with the fire department getting a landscape palette that can mitigate some of this issue that we've got to live with?
Yeah, and I think we've been focusing on as a requirement to show adjacent footprints of structures as a requirement, but you also have to show the disparity in elevation. If properties are much lower than a property next door, then you do get a magnified effect of something being built 30 feet. And actually, if it's 10 feet, 15 feet below, you'll get the 45-foot feeling. So, yeah, finding out how high those homes are. And, again, don't be shy about asking more information. If they just show you footprints but don't photographs of what's next door, show those photographs of different directions so you get the sense of, oh, okay, that home is lower, and we're going to have to worry about this elevation. And I'm sure you do that right now already. And, again, we haven't had a lot of complaints, so I don't want to state that there was a big problem for these, when in reality that we've had a lot of success in beautiful architecture, and people are happy. They're in their homes and they're back. Thank you. Do you have some more comments?
That if it's the same homeowner and they're doing the same footprint, that maybe it's all right to streamline them through. But then earlier you were saying sometimes the same footprint can mean different elevations. So
I think that's maybe a little bit of a dilemma. You know, initially the idea was, right after the fire, if you were an owner and came back in and said, look, I just want to build the house the way it was before it burnt down, let me through the process as quickly as you can. Mm-hmm. And I think that everybody in this city was attuned to the dilemma all those homeowners had, and we were all kind of as citizens saying, that's okay, let's get people back in their homes. But now that time has passed, now we're at the dilemma of, well, okay, I was the homeowner, I want to come back and build it on the same footprint, but, oh, gee, it was a Spanish-style home, now I want to build a contemporary flying wedge, and I want to put the plate heights 2 feet higher than they were before, et cetera, et cetera. Then I think, that puts us in the dilemma. And, here's a good example of, who knows, maybe that was exactly the same footprint, but now we've got a vertical element in 3 dimensions that we've got to deal with.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to
that's my
clarify
concern.
that, even if it is the same footprint, that
Yeah, well, could it be square footage driven instead of footprint driven?
Yeah, that could also be it. I mean, people have doubled the size of their homes. I mean, and I've warned applicants that, there's more likelihood that they'll be referred to the full board. But again, I think there's some pressure to keep homes on the consent calendar because they applied or at consent, and they know that, you're putting them on the full, or it would be more review. And so that's consequently why you only had 8 referred. That's not a lot of homes being referred to full board.
No, it should have
Either
been a
they're
lot
all
more.
great, or the consent reviewers did a good job to get them in compliance. And so, what I'll do is I'll draft a proposal based on some of your comments and review it with our managers and see if we need to identify or advise City Council that we're going to make a change and make sure that no one objects to that change.
Does that require formal action from this board to go to City Council?
No, I think, again, I put it on as a discussion, not a miscellaneous action item. Obviously, this board can go stronger than that. You can make a vote, you can put it on for more discussion. At this point, what I was going to do is take your input, evaluate whether we needed to make some changes, and propose a proposed change in our processing of these applications, and possibly notify council that we're doing that, in case so they're aware of it. So that's sort of the steps that I'm thinking of doing. And I can review that process change with you all once I draft it, so you know what we're thinking.
Sounds good.
Madam Chair, I think it might behoove us when Jaime does come back with a report. In my view, it will carry a lot more weight if we take a formal action at that point. In other words, he comes back, here's what I'm proposing, here's what the words look like.
And I can put that on the agenda like that,
might be
so we know that this
be a
board
little
is all
stronger,
voting to do this.
Yeah, a little stronger statement going
Okay.
back to council.
No, I agree.
Okay, we'll do it that way.
Yes.
I don't want to drag this on, but I have 2 points. One, tonight we had an example of a project that was a fire rebuild, and it came back once, and then 2 weeks later, then it came back again with a different design, much improved, almost, I think, unanimous approval by the neighbors and the board. And we don't want our board to get the reputation of, oh, you don't want to go there. If you do this, you'll get to go straight to consent. I mean, we feel like we're volunteering because we're offering something. And when you look at these pictures up here, you say you don't want a generic neighborhood. That's what you said. I'm not really even sure what that means, but you can tell that if there is somebody watching over the neighborhood, and if there's a really modern house, like the board has approved some houses on the Mesa even when there's nothing like it, but you can find some elements that integrate, or landscaping, or forms, or different, elements of style, so that you can allow for different vision, but still, we want to be the ones that oversee the entire neighborhood, and this one doesn't have that right now. And if there's 40 more coming, I think we should look at all of them.
Well, that's not the consensus of this group yet.
I'm just throwing
That,
that out just as the main
But I'm going
point
to
of
check
view.
into the issue of ownership, whether we can deal with the ownership question differently. I don't know if legally we can, but I will certainly. Well, the idea that if you're a new owner, we have to treat those different than the original fire victims. And so I'll definitely look into that question, and there might be a size issue too, where we can make clear rules.
If we stick to the guidelines, the size, the bulk, the scale, we should be covered, at least to that extent. If it's over 85%, or
Well, again, 85% is not the magic number because some lots are bigger, and so it's really a guideline issue. I think we need to really just identify under what circumstance and tell them early, this is your process, rather than have it right now, well, you may or may not. That doesn't play well with the public also.
I would like to add.
Yes, yes. And just to clarify, what I meant, Generac, is that having them all sort of similar in appearance, that we do want some variety, hopefully, in these neighborhoods.
Those are all Victorians, you know, and so there's so many different. It was always eclectic here.
Right.
It was never all that, you know. I think it was Sheila Lodge that really started pushing the Spanish look.
Right, and you had the Mesa constructed in a certain era. And,
Yes, and that also,
obviously
which is-
those neighborhoods are transitional as they improve.
I totally agree with you. A thing that really stands out for me, though, and this is just a side note, is when you go down the old downtown streets and you see these apartment complexes, they're obviously built in the early 60s, early 50s, that absolutely stand out.
Yeah.
And you wonder, where was the board back then when all that was approved?
We weren't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's...
there was a time where it was not in place.
And it shows, it actually shows.
Yeah.
I think you made a good point. You know, the FAR, there are really bad houses at 85%. And so I think once you exceed 85, you have to look at the, you know, the special design for it.
Well, again, I'm committed to go do some more post-construction evaluation, and once we get some more photos, we'll put together another one throughout the city.
Okay, and at this time then, I will adjourn the October 22nd, 2012 Single Family Design Board. Have a good evening.